we have a tremendous panel. We're trying to cover all aspects of the intelligent assistant opportunity, but with the advent of Siri, a lot of people sort of thought it's a mobile thing, and it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. And I want to expose some of those issues with some of the smartest people I know, minus Adam Chire. So we have Stefan Weitz who's Director of Search at Microsoft. Michael Berner, actually I'm not doing this in order, but Michael's two to my right, two to your left, from Easily Do, whom I knew over at BeVocal. Robert Weideman, EVP of the Enterprise Division of Nuance, whom I've known around Dragon stuff.
Yep.
Balaji Narayana, whom I just met, but they're taking an enterprise-to-enterprise approach. But I'm going to have each member of this group sort of introduce themselves by more than name, sort of explain what their involvement is with the intelligent assistants. Then I have some questions asked, and then, as you've been doing, I invite questions from the audience. So we'll start with Robert.
Hello, thank you, and hello, everybody. So I'm Robert Wiedemann. I'm with Nuance Communications. I head up the Enterprise Division. We're focused on applying this technology, speech, artificial intelligence, to the customer service arena, though I have managed other parts of our business, including Dragon. And as you probably know, Nuance is delivering the same technology into the consumer devices and services market.
Very good. Michael?
Hi, my name is Michael Berner. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Easily Do. We're an application that makes sure you never miss anything. We do that by helping you to organize all of the information in the various apps you have, making sure you leave it on time for the next meeting, get to the flight on time, follow gate changes, even things like know if your niece broke her arm or something from Facebook. So we try and pull in all the information you care about, present it to you, and then execute tasks for you as well. We're on iPhone and Android. Check us out if you haven't already. Thanks.
My name is Stefan Weitz. I work at Microsoft. I was one of the few people initially who helped start the Bing search engine, and now we are looking at how we can take that search model, how we can take the guts of search and apply that to real-world tasks and transactions using intelligent agents. And our agent that's out there now is this thing called Cortana, which uses the search backend to do a lot of the things that we think are magical in the space.
Hello, my name is Balaji. I'm the co-founder of OpenStream. At OpenStream, we're really focused on the enterprise virtual assistant story, essentially enabling employees within the organization with virtual assistant technology. And so the average CIO is working with several business applications that need to be enabled on mobile devices, different kinds of mobile devices, fairly complex problem. And the approach we've taken, there are several solutions, several types of approaches in play today. And the approach we've taken is to bring it together in a virtual assistant platform to enable lines of businesses to deliver functionality on these type of devices.
So there we have a really good spectrum of individuals and companies offering varieties of mobile experience. And I have some canned questions, but I want to start with this one. We heard earlier that human-like speech isn't core to the intelligent assistant. Would you agree or disagree? And we'll start with Robert.
I'd agree. We believe that intelligent assistants have to support whatever modality the user wants. That includes sometimes speaking to the system, sometimes texting through a chat interface. We've actually implemented systems for a couple of large banks where it happens, one in China, that the main way customers interact with the bank for service is through SMS messaging. And as we know, people tend to SMS completely differently than the way they speak and the way they type to a chat agent. And so we think you need to be able to support whatever input into the system.
I think eventually speech has to be a part of what's envisioned as an intelligent assistant. If you watch any movie on intelligent assistants, they're talking to them, so there you go, I'm right. So that's the future. There is a ton
and
of...
they dress funny, too.
What's that?
In the movies, they dress funny, too.
They do. They dress very strange and have weird relationships. But anyways, but there's so much. The truth is that what we're doing is really, really hard. It's hard because it's technically hard, but it's also really hard because you're dealing with us. You're dealing with what we expect from these services and devices, and so we get excited and we think we can say everything to this thing, and then all of a sudden it turns out it doesn't work that well, and then we have to learn what it covers, and so the technology around this is really hard. And we believe that as we evolve our personal assistant, that there is a ton of utility that can be accomplished just by focusing on trying to figure out what are the things you'd like to have done so you don't have to ask your assistant. So that's kind of the area we're focusing on right now. But in 5 years, we all want to be building her and be a part of that future. So we believe speech is eventually important.
Her is fine. I want to build a Terminator. But I was told I can't. I was told I can't do that. I'm not sure that speech is the only. I think you're right. It's one modality, but really we think of it more as natural user interaction. So NUI. So it might be gesture, it might be speech, it might be typing, it might be pointing, it might be touching, all these sorts of things. And so it's less about. Speech is one thing. It was kind of the early parlor trick. If you could get speech to work, it was magical because the thing could talk to you. But it's not the only thing, because there are so many times that you're in a meeting or in this conference right here or sitting around listening where you can't have the subvocal utterance to the device to make it do something. Instead, you really need to be thinking about how you can effectuate that interaction, that task completion through any modality that you can put forth. So we're really looking at how do we make computing systems and agents in particular, how do we make those things easy to interact with no matter where you are or what you're trying to get done, but make it in context. So if you're watching your television, for example, yelling at your TV, it can work, but it's hard to do echo cancellation and noise cancellation. But gesturing to your TV or using a second screen to control the television, if it feels natural and normal, we think that's probably a better way to go than just focusing on the very cool but not always practical speech.
I largely agree with that, and I think the W3C has been working on this for some time with the initiatives on the Multimodal Interaction Committee. And so there are several use cases we've considered there. I mean, let's say if you go to the checkout counter and you have the supermarket, you have your 6-year-old with you, and your 6-year-old says, Mommy or Daddy, I want that. And so if you really look at it, you've done speech recognition, you've done natural language understanding, you've done gesture recognition, you've done visual cognition. It's that Kit Kat, and your answer is going to be no, right? And so you're going to put that all together, and the important thing is the ability to synthesize this context. It's not possible to really have a pre-canned concept of context putting together in terms of the types of interactions you can have, but the ability to bring that together in a rather fluid way. And so the W3C has focused on this for some time, ever since 2002, with the Multimodal Interaction Group, and these are some of the use cases we consider. So largely, yes, speech is really important, but it's not the only way we would want to have our intent understood.
I would add just that those comments brought something more to my mind. There are some environments, though, that we're seeing where speech is a requirement. As you start seeing what's going on in wearable devices, particularly that have form factors that are either going to be too small for you to interact with efficiently by touch or others, we've actually implemented with a robot that is going to be focusing on delivering customer service in a conversational type way. So when you walk into the store and you ask, where's the men's shoes, the robot will actually talk to you and answer your questions. That, in fact, will actually first show up in a bunch of mobile phone outlets soon. And so I completely agree. And we have to address all the modalities. But there are going to be environments and create possibilities for interactive assistance, intelligent assistance, in places where speech is going to be the primary way that you interface with it.
Wow. So if it's doing so much, what does the center of gravity move over to sort of aggregation of all this information that is useful to me and is built to be accessible through my mobile, or is it more on other technologies around artificial intelligence where, regardless of how I make an entry, that it understands me or anticipates? I mean, I know that's like the broadest question I could think of, but Stefan, you mentioned that this grew out of search, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What is the current thinking, say, at Microsoft around it?
Well, I think if you look at what's happened with search in particular, or the web in general, it's all about the digitization of the entire physical planet. And so we always talk a lot about how the main goal of search is to take all the corporeal, all the physical things that are around us, the people, the places, the things, everything we touch, interact with, et cetera, and make it digital, because machines then can understand that. And so once you've modeled the entire planet inside of a search system, we have about 33 billion objects right now that are described in some level of detail inside of our object store. Once you understand that and understand all the relationships between those things, then you can begin to get to the point that you're speaking of, which is understanding me as an entity, as a human that have these characteristics, understanding the other things that are around me that I interact with, and understanding my constraints and my intents, and bring those all together using a search backend is how we're approaching the problem. Because it is one of those very hard things when you start getting into domain specificity, making an agent do one or two things really well. You do see people adopt and then abandon because they are frustrated by its seeming intuition and seeming omniscience until they hit a block, and then they realize, oh, it's Eliza. I'm not sure you guys are all old enough to remember Eliza back in the 80s, the little fake basic program that would pretend like it was
You're
a
not feeling
psychiatrist.
well. You're not feeling well, I'm sorry.
Exactly. And so there is a huge, I know you're working on a lot of this too, how do you take all the real world things with which we interact and assemble those in chains that allow you to actually do something in the real world using this digital superpower that the agents are slowly imbuing us with.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces to this. We think that by trying to predict your intentions, the things you want to do. So, I mean, the easy example is, why do you ask your assistant to remind you it's your father's birthday when your father's birthday's on 4 of your calendars? Everybody, by the way, has 5 calendars average that they keep and maintain. So, but then there's more complex things. So, and this is something I know you guys are working on, which is why when you call into Wells Fargo and you're calling because your account was suspended or your password was shut off, why do you have to go through this long menu that says, here's why I'm calling? They're the one that shut you off, so so they know why you're calling, or somebody over there does. So but you need both pieces, because sometimes people are going to be calling, and there's no way, even looking at all the signals, that you could figure out what that intent, the reason for their calling, and that's where speech or some other sort of open interface, the search interface, is going to be important. So when I said this was complex, that's because all these parts need to come together to build a truly intelligent assistant, and then she needs to be, or he needs to be loving, warm, and all those other things as well. So.
We're strong.
So Balaji's company has an interesting approach, because they're employer to employee assistant. And we saw a demo of it, and it's kind of like a portal. It's a portable thing you carry around with everything, with your schedules, with your contacts. And then there's some organic element to it, because you go live with what your employee is telling you he or she wants up and running, and then you give IT the power to bless that and encrypt end to end. So what are you finding? This is a funny way of understanding the demand side here. What are individuals in their employee persona demanding of their mobile portal-ish thing?
Right. So I think you hit it right when you said portal, because that was the next generation portal right now, or the current du jour, I would say, is having a mobile website or a mobile app store within the enterprise, and then installing mobile apps on your desktop or phone top or wherever it is. And that model really hasn't worked out for a variety of complex reasons. One of them being it's difficult to do cross-platform. CIOs are trying to get their arms around just doing one instead of 10 different platforms. But more importantly, they don't talk to each other. They have varying user experiences. And so the average user, that is the employee, is not really able to get the productivity aspects that are really supposed to be realized from the solution. The other important part about search is if you really look at it, enterprises have already invested. They're very strong in business process management, all these business workflows have already been there and done that. They've done that for many, many years. They're good at it. But they're not good at engaging, bringing that to the front end. And in fact, business class is probably, it has the opposite meaning in the enterprise space when you say, right?
It's a downgrade
business
to go
class
to work.
seat on an airplane is great, but a business class app is not. So that's what we're trying to bridge here, because the triggers for decisioning exist. They're already there, and if you can realize that through a virtual assistant interface, make that interaction fluid, then you're making your employee productive. And whether it's your email, your CRM systems, your learning, your document management, all these things come together in a synthesized way.
And that's in the container of an enterprise.
That's right.
Yeah.
In the context of an enterprise, yes.
Are you, I don't know who to ask this to. We'll go to Michael. Are you seeing, as people go to use Easily Do, what are you seeing as the most popular usage patterns? Is it around, messaging, calendar? Well, you're bound to a calendar, but does it fan out from that to, reservations and?
Yeah, so it's kind of surprising. The most frequently used things are helping to clean up or add or adjust things to contacts. It turns out we all have a disaster in our contacts. But the thing that people find the most valuable are the things that we're finding from email. And I think there are two things that are going on in email. So some of the things we do in email are, we'll notice that you've agreed to have a meeting with someone, and we'll pop that stuff on your calendar and their calendar. So the time, we'll notice that you have a flight, and we'll track that whole chain of events. So you booked a flight, now you need to book a hotel, and you've got to be at a certain gate at a certain time. You have to get through TSA, so we put up the security line lead times to tell you when to leave for the airport. So there's all these tasks that we're assembling from email and helping you with. But there's an interesting dynamic that's going on with email, and I used to have this joke around, if I'm glad the TSA is reading, or NSA is reading my email, because I can't read it. But it turns out that nobody can read all the email that we have. And so we've started looking at some of our users' emails, and it's like they're literally, after all the spam filters, they're only opening 20% of their emails. It's just ridiculous. So we're overwhelmed with all this data coming into a few of our channels, and so when we go in and pull these things out, if there are salespeople in the room, how many of you spend time updating Salesforce by putting contacts in from important leads? By the way, most really important executive customers don't put a signature on their email, so you have to go into the body and try and find their cell number. You can just start to get a sense for all the problems. All this data is in email. We all hate email. Like the endorphin, the charge we get, the hormones that get kicked off from communicating through other people through media, they now come through completely other channels. They're coming through SMS, they're coming through Snapchat, they're coming through. So we don't even enjoy being in email where we used to enjoy being in there. So I'd say long answer to your question, which is we see a lot of sort of basic things, but then email is where a lot of data is for us.
Yeah, we see folks, first of all, engaging with these agents in very playful ways. So I was looking this morning at some of the logs, and it's tell me a joke is by far the most important thing we
Really?
see at first.
Well,
We
you're
see
going to find
we see a
paper
curve.
call pattern,
Yeah.
these old 976 number, joke of the
Yeah,
day.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Are they good
Okay.
jokes, or?
We have great jokes. But tell me a joke. Thank you is an odd one, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Where can I hide a body? One of my favorites that I saw. Shockingly, 8% of the initial ones are will you marry me, which just tells me we have some very sad users. But we see them beginning with a lot of these chit chats, which is how people come in and engage. And then we see fairly dramatic double-digit increases in overall usage, both with an agent technology as well as search. So you see 20% increase in search queries on devices that have the agent installed versus control, where we had no agent installed. So it's kind of like a gateway drug. They get in with the device, they get in with the agent, they see it has some benefit, and that prompts them and incents them to use the device more for other online tasks or other search type tasks.
Yeah, and at Nuance, because we cover a broad spectrum, I think we're processing 5 billion interactions through our cloud system now every 3 months. And so we've got solutions. We provide Samsung with their intelligent assistant with S-Voice, for example. That's getting more of the utilization that I think you two are seeing. In the customer service world, We definitely see people interested in, and they're much more focused in engagement because they're going there with the purpose, and the assistant is integrated with a banking app or Domino's is here, Coke, into their applications, and so their questions are much more specific. But we're definitely seeing customer service, marketing, and sales support, so integrating with e-commerce sites is another use case. And then finally, in our healthcare division, there's actually a purpose-built version for use by care providers, nurses, and doctors, and so they're asking about drug interactions and those types of things as well. So I think we definitely see different usage patterns and more focused use as we get into specific verticals where people are already in the mindset that they're trying to accomplish something very, very specific. But it speaks to the need, and one of the questions, or the way you phrased this at the start, moving the virtual assistant into the cloud and providing cognitive technologies that allow for you to then deliver that at targeted market segments is really something that has become a reality over the last 3 years. And I think that's, and by being able to do that and get access to all this data, it's enabled us to use different methods for deriving intent and for the system to become more intelligent. And so that has definitely accelerated the use of it into the markets that I think various companies are addressing.
So when somebody says, "Will you marry me?" that assumes there's a persona or somebody that they're picturing or is explicitly there. So was Cortana the person they were?
Yeah, they were proposing to Cortana, yes.
Okay.
They were, yeah.
And it gets the question, how important do you think a persona is versus like cards being served up that you have to react to? Yeah.
Well, I mean, for us, it depends a lot on what you're trying to do. To me,
Yeah.
there are times when I love to have the personality back and forth. I think it's interesting to have that interaction. And in fact, what we saw, especially with people who weren't as familiar with technology, they wanted to have a persona which built trust and caused them to explore more. Without that, they were a little less likely to go and actually engage with the product. Once there was a voice and a joke and intonation and all those sorts of things, they became more willing to explore. For those who were more used to working with technology, that was less it was a nice parlor trick out of the gate, but then they quickly recognized, even with Cortana, you don't have to talk to it at all. You can just simply launch it, and it'll give you proactive cards saying, here are things that you might care about, all in text, right, or even in speech if you want it. But certainly we found that without it, we saw not the same level of, not the same increase in overall interaction with the device without that personality.
Yeah, I think I strongly feel that having a personality to the intelligence system is critical, particularly in the customer service world. Sure. But humans, by nature, we personify things. We personify our pets, our cats and our dogs. We personify a lot of things, and so it's an opportunity for on the enterprise customer service side for people to leverage that into brand identification. Windstream, Coke here, Domino's. You're seeing successful implementations of that, and it does increase engagement. And one interesting one, because we see a lot of data as well, it turns out that if you put forward a virtual assistant in the collection space, so a telco, you're late on your bill, you want a payment, people will engage with a virtual person much more readily than if they believe it's a real person that they're engaging with. And so we actually support that through outbound messaging. We remind them that they're late on their bill, and they'll actually engage in that because it's less embarrassing, right? They're not talking to a human, and they'll actually negotiate for when the payment is. And it was an interesting one because we get data back, and it shows just how complex the challenge is, which is, usually in outbound SMS messaging you get from these companies, you get to answer yes or no or click on, to drive a call. Now we're allowing more intelligent input, and we got one where the message back, the message was, you're late on a bill, would you like to schedule a payment? And the message back said, I'm a kid, my dad pays my bill, here's his phone number, message him.
Whoa. At least he didn't say, talk to my intelligent assistant.
And so what we're hoping one day is we'll actually be able to take that and then message the dad and say, hey, you know, your kid says you're responsible for the bill.
You thought you had a private life. Questions from our attendees? Wow.
In the back of the room.
Yeah, I was very interested in your comments on connecting IVAs to the cloud. So you talked about, you alluded to being able to drive intent better. Could you just expand on that a little bit? I mean, you're talking about adding third-party data, or what's going on there?
Yeah. So first, from the way that we see our infrastructure, you've got to have a cognitive layer that includes speech input, text-to-speech output, text input. We actually use voice biometrics, so talking about being able to personalize it so we can identify a banking person by their voice ID. You know, on through dialogue and connectivity to data. Because our systems do collect the intent, so we get the conversations. We're able to take that and do analytics against it and improve the intelligence of the system. And in our cloud, we do connect to the services that a bank might have or any business through a secure mechanism, so that it actually is engaging with the back-end systems of that enterprise. And so we're able to share for that specific bank what are people engaging with, where is it successful, where is it not successful, and what do we do about it on a customer-by-customer basis. And because we have 6,500 customers in my business, we're able to then take a look across industries. And so we have high clusters in telco, high clusters in banking and insurance, high clusters in retail, utilities. And so we can actually improve those systems for the industry based on just the general way people are asking for things. For example, in the airline industry, when you ask somebody, you know, how can I help you? And they say, I'd like to book a ticket. And you say, where do you want to go? You can get a lot of different responses, including, I'd like to go to my grandson's house. And so being able to deal with those things for that industry is enabled through the cloud mechanism.
Like when the view we have is a little different. It's more, these devices enable, they do many things for us, but one thing they do is that they allow service providers to give you an easy way to say, yes, help me out, by looking at all of the different data points, basically all my data. So on Android anyways, with one button, you can get access, like, you know, one, okay, I accept. You can give an app access to everything. Like, yes, you can read my text messages, you can read my emails, you can know where I am, you can follow my footsteps, you can, so all of that data kind of changes the way you have to look at the problem. iPhone makes you go a little slower, Windows Phone makes you go a little slower, but there's a tremendous amount of value behind that. Most of us are getting to the point where we couldn't operate without something that's assisting us, because there's just too much to keep track of. And so we look at the problem as, like, there are areas where we have to tune data, but more for us it's around trying to say, okay, well, if they're driving and they're late, then that's a signal that they probably have to text and tell somebody they're late. And if there are 5 people on that meeting, maybe we should offer to do that, or maybe there's a setup you can do ahead of time where you automatically just text people if you're running late. That's a small example, but there are thousands of these small examples, from travel to what you're going to buy. In fact, we think that almost 90% of what you're going to do is in all of those signals that I just talked about. If you know where they typically eat, what they've been purchasing, what their calendar is, where they have to be today, where they're driving, what stores they're going by, you can start to really build a picture of how you can help that person. And that's one of the most exciting things for us, is trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we identify those cases, build them so that they're great experiences, which is really ridiculously hard. Even that text somebody example that I just gave is ridiculously difficult to get right. So that's kind of how we look at bringing all of the different information from the cloud as well as the devices together to try and help you.
90%? Oh, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I think one important thing is to actually have a hybrid model because you need to do context processing at the point of consumption. So if you're with me in a car, we're both on, say, 101, and we're both having a stomach churning stop and go right there. I don't have to push a button on your forehead and set my status to driving. You know I'm driving because you're in my context. And part of that context processing is happening at the point of consumption. Part of it is, so it's a hybrid model in the way this is getting distributed.
Yeah. And I think that exposes some interesting issues with what should go on board the device, what should go on in the cloud, what you can do when you're disconnected, even though you're dependent on the cloud, and
Right.
we're sorting all that out. Is that fair to say? We have a
Question, yes. When I think of mobile personal assistants, I really think in two different spaces. One, mobile personal assistants, as Robert mentioned, robots. I'm away from my stuff. I'm away from the computing environment that I normally have access to, or the telephones or whatever. So I'm mobile in the sense of, I need a robot to tell me where to find what I need to do, or I need some kind of other assistance. I want to set that realm aside and get to the more personal experience, which is my mobile phone specifically, which is my wallet, it's my identity, it's my context, it's a lot of things that I carry around with me, and everything is going to the cloud. Can you talk a little about trust?
Well, I'll speak to it. I mean, part of what the companies have to address is security, and with security and with never failing on security, you build trust over time. I think people should have a natural concern about their data, and I think what we were just talking about, separating kind of what's on your device from what's in the cloud, but whatever is shared with the cloud is going to have to be done in a way that is highly secure, and more that's happening. I mean, there was a strong resistance to the use of cloud within companies, organizations, for many, many years. I mean, we've been selling the solutions. Michael was selling the solutions for way longer than I've been involved with it. But that's starting to turn. The resistance was trust. The resistance was concern about security. But the benefits that come from cloud technologies are now pushing people to, first of all, make sure that security is there, but secondly, to take advantage of the power of the cloud is compelling them to believe that actually can happen.
Yeah, and on Cortana at least, we thought a lot about this because that concern of what's on the device versus what's in the cloud. And so for that example, we used a thing called a notebook. And so on the notebook, it has things like who are your best friends, where do you live, where do you work, what are your interests, and a lot of those are actually premised on device and don't go to the cloud. And other ones, depending on kind of the sensitivity, do. And you can control that on the device and which goes where. And so there is a lot of thought about how do you, because you're right, it's really a pain in the butt to not have your home in the cloud, like the address. Having to re-enter that over and over is an idiotic thing. However, there are some folks who just prefer that not to be somewhere else. They want it to be only on a device. So there is this notion of partitioning and how do you segment personas to where certain characteristics are stored for broad use across all applications, and certain ones are stored like the people that you really want to break through on your phone when you're in the do not disturb mode. Those things can reside more locally and give people the control to actually do that. So it just depends on the application.
And people kind of want control and they want privacy, but they don't like to exert a lot of effort to
Yes,
refine
very
that.
true.
They won't fix it. So a bunch of it you have to sort of do on their behalf. And Ian, I believe.
So I'd like to know, where can I hide a body? That would be really good to know. Thanks. No, I actually want to follow up on this because you're talking about the security aspects, but what about the sort of intimacy aspects here? Some of the use cases that Michael was describing, I may be demographically inclined to think that that's kind of creepy, that level of intimacy with these assistants. Are you seeing some resistance there? Is it by demographic, and is there a demographic that's more receptive to that level of intimacy, some that's less? Are there other personal characteristics that define?
I think across the, it's a great question. Across intimacy, so I was thinking about talk to me about trust question that came up prior, and trust involves intimacy, involves how, like, I signed up for the service, and so now I expect you to treat me a certain way. So there's that level of trust, and trust in the brand promise. And then there's trust that you're actually putting the security things in place to keep my data secure. And then there's trust that your business model isn't based on my data, which is a whole other dimension to trust. I have to do a little PR and say we keep things secure. Our business model does not depend on your data, and we do build a brand promise which focuses on what we think that is evolving into the future for many of us, which is that it is everything's a little creepy when you first hear about it. Like the first telephone ringing in somebody's house was super creepy, and then texting was creepy, and then GPS was creepy. Life 360 has 40 million families where everybody's just tracking them, like the whole family all the time. Everybody knows where it is. That's crazy. So, like if I would have said that was going to happen to you all 2 years ago, I missed that investment, and I'm like kicking myself every day. That's just, I mean, we are evolving.
Leave it to Peter Thiel.
Yeah, we're evolving at a rate that's astonishing in terms of how we view privacy. So for our users, what we find, there is a leading group of people that believe both in that they want those helpful things, and that there is and that they'll also trust us with that data, which we take very seriously. But we think that if you look forward 4 years, how are you going to live in a world where you're not giving access or expecting assistance from technology? I can't even imagine it today almost. So I think we're going to have to all go through that.
One last question.
Okay. Just want to quickly point out, I guess this was commented before about whether we're just going to have one assistant compared to hundreds or thousands. Have you gone, I guess piggybacking on security, have you dealt with any clients or customers that have actually, instead of creating their own assistants, let's say Cortana, they were like, can we just give Cortana access to our database so Cortana can just go ahead and reiterate? So this was brought up on our IVA team at Vanguard, saying, you know what if we allow, let's say Siri or Cortana to have access to basic level information in our database, and they can reiterate it for us.
Yeah, there are steps being taken even right now. In Cortana, there's a whole thing with Foursquare. So Foursquare actually authors into the Cortana canvas. So what we do is what we do pretty well, which is derive intent. But then we realize that we don't have domain expertise. And so we broker out a call to a service like Foursquare, who then does have expertise in, say, location or tips or ratings or whatnot, and actually allow them to author into the canvas. And so that is a trend I think you're going to see more and more, is that you might have agent-to-agent brokering, or more likely you just have service-to-agent brokering, where you have some defined service in the sky, whether it's an enterprise service or a consumer service, that is invoked when the agent, the main primary controlling agent, derives that what you want to do is foo, and foo is best resolved by a particular service or other agent. So I think I know that's the direction that a lot of companies are going right now.
And in our world, and what we see, because this is core to our business, is providing virtual assistants into banks and enterprises. It really relates back. I think the biggest hurdle relates back to the trust and security issue. When you're providing a platform, a cloud platform for virtual assistants to a bank, they're going to want PCI compliance, which is a security level. They're going to want to make sure that anybody that's working in the data center is drug tested and has a background check and has fingerprinting. And so the challenge that I think that more broad services like Bing is going to have is that a big enough market opportunity for them to invest in that and to create teams that are going to be very focused around that market vertical. I think the good thing about this industry, and I expect that this meeting a year from now is going to be 2 times or 3 times as large as this one, which is actually a great turnout, is this is a huge market. And in the same way that you see with all other huge markets, you're going to see vertical implementations or market-specific implementations that are going to serve different parts of the market, either in the way that they handle the back end, in enterprise data, or the way they're handling the front end. And I think the exciting thing is that in my view, there'll come a day where 99% of customer service is done without having a human interacting with you, that you'll be able to get self-service in an effective way whenever you want it. I think that what Michael's team is doing around creating automation and predictive techniques for making sure that I'm on time to my meetings and that it's easier for me to go on a trip, people will use it, and it's exploding, I think, across the board. So I think you'll see vertical implementations and market-specific implementations as a result of the market opportunity.
We are actually doing that right now because we have a sort of a horizontal product that we take to the enterprise. Several lines of businesses have the opportunity to change that workflow, change that front-end experience, and then deploy it into their environment. So one or more systems with a specialized virtual assistant interface, if you will, and that's what we're actually taking to the marketplace.
Very good. Well, join me in thanking this panel. Very good information.